The backstage area of America's Got Talent buzzed with a chaotic energy, a mix of anticipation, nerves, and the kind of raw excitement that could almost be tasted in the air. Bright stage lights filtered in through the cracks of the curtains, casting golden streaks across the concrete floor. Contestants bustled about adjusting microphones, tuning guitars, rehearsing lyrics under their breath, and occasionally sharing forced smiles with the camera crew that hovered nearby. Among all this frenzy, one figure stood almost frozen in place: Emily. Emily was young, in her early 20s, with a soft face framed by a cascade of chestnut hair. Her eyes, wide and unblinking, darted nervously between the doors that led to the stage and the judges' table she had seen so many times on TV. She clutched a worn notebook close to her chest, the edges frayed and the pages filled with scribbled lyrics, reminders, and dreams she had nurtured in the quiet corners of her small hometown. To anyone glancing quickly, she might have seemed unremarkable, just another hopeful contestant in the sea of talent, but those who looked closer could see a light flickering behind her eyes, a spark of something brave trying desperately to rise. Emily had waited for this moment for years, yet now that it had arrived, fear gripped her like a vise. She could feel her hands trembling as she smoothed down the front of her dress, the fabric soft but unfamiliar in her sweaty palms. Her heart raced so loudly she worried the nearby contestants might hear it. She thought of her life up to this point: long hours as a waitress, the lonely nights spent singing into an old mirror in her tiny apartment, the endless days when it seemed no one would ever hear her voice. And yet, here she was, standing on the threshold of a stage that could change everything. A group of contestants walked past, laughing and joking as if the world beyond the stage didn't exist. One of them, a confident young man with a guitar slung over his shoulder, smirked and muttered just loud enough for Emily to hear, "Hope she's ready. This isn't a karaoke night at the diner." She swallowed hard, feeling her cheeks burn. Self-doubt clawed at her, whispering that she didn't belong, that she had no right to be here. She wanted to turn away, to escape back to the comfort of her apartment, to hide from the judgment she imagined was already directed at her. And then, a gentle voice cut through the chaos. "Hey, you look like you could use a sip." Emily blinked and looked down. A fellow contestant, a kind-faced woman with a soft ponytail, was holding out a water bottle. It was a small gesture, almost invisible in the swirl of activity around them, but to Emily, it felt monumental. She took the bottle with a trembling hand and nodded, murmuring a quiet, "Thanks. You've got this," the woman added, giving her a reassuring smile before moving on to join her group. It wasn't encouragement shouted for the cameras or meant to be noticed. It was quiet, human and honest. Emily felt something stir inside her, a small flame of hope that she hadn't realized she still carried. She took a long sip of water, letting the cool liquid slide down her throat, grounding her in the moment. She tried to steady her breathing, inhaling deeply and counting silently. 1, 2, 3, one step at a time, she told herself. One note, one lyric, one heartbeat at a time. As she adjusted her notebook again, Emily's mind wandered back to the early mornings in her hometown, where she would rise before the sun, juggle coffee orders, and still find time to hum melodies under her breath. She remembered the way her voice had comforted strangers on dreary mornings, how even a simple smile from a customer felt like a tiny acknowledgement of her gift. She had sung for tips, for friends, for family, even for herself, but never for the world. Not until now. A sudden flurry of motion startled her. A camera crew passed, setting up their equipment, and one of the producers gave a quick shout to the contestants. 5 minutes, everyone! 5 minutes to shine." The words echoed in Emily's ears like a drumbeat. Panic surged. 5 minutes, that was all the time she had to pull herself together, to step from this dim backstage into the glaring lights and the expectant faces of the judges and audience. She sank onto a nearby chair, gripping her notebook like a lifeline. The worn pages smelled faintly of coffee and old paper, familiar and comforting in a way that reminded her of home. She traced the edge of a lyric with her finger. "Sing like the world is listening, because maybe it is." The words, once casual scribbles, now felt like a mantra. She whispered them under her breath, trying to anchor herself. Emily's gaze wandered to a group of young fans who had been allowed to watch the contestants from a small section near the stage. One little boy held up a handmade sign that read, "You can do it." Her lips twitched into the tiniest smile. She had never thought of herself as a hero, but here were people, complete strangers, rooting for her purely because of hope, hope that a single voice could matter. Suddenly, a familiar voice rang out above the chatter. It was Mr. Johnson, her mentor and friend from her hometown, appearing seemingly out of nowhere. He looked older than she remembered, with gentle eyes and a worn cap pulled low over his forehead. Emily's heart leaped. "Mr. Johnson, how did you get here?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I wouldn't miss this for the world," he said, smiling warmly. "I didn't have a ticket, but I found a way. You need someone in your corner, don't you?" Tears pricked at the corners of Emily's eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming sense of support, the realization that someone believed in her even when she wavered in doubt. Mr. Johnson placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. remember why you're here, he said. Not for them, not for the cameras, not even for the applause. Sing because it's yours to give. Sing because your voice belongs to someone out there who needs to hear it. Emily nodded, clutching her notebook tighter. Her trembling hand steadied slightly. For the first time that day, fear didn't feel like the only option. Hope, small, fragile, but undeniably present, tingled in her chest. Backstage continued its whirlwind, but Emily sat with a newfound calm. She watched other contestants laughing, arguing and preparing, but she felt separated in a way that was empowering rather than isolating. This was her moment. She didn't have to be the loudest or the flashiest. She didn't have to compete with the confidence of others. She only had to step forward and let her song carry her truth. The clock ticked down. 4 minutes, 3 minutes. Emily rose from her chair, her knees shaky but her heart steady. She tucked her notebook under her arm, took a deep breath, and walked toward the stage entrance. The roar of the crowd beyond the curtain seeped through, intimidating yet electrifying. Every step felt heavier, yet every step also felt necessary. She was stepping into more than a competition. She was stepping into a chance to touch hearts, to share a piece of herself she had guarded for so long. And as the curtain began to part, Emily felt that quiet, steady spark of courage ignite into a flame. It was fragile, but it was enough. Enough to begin, enough to try, enough to believe that one song, one voice, one moment could change everything. Emily's feet barely made a sound on the polished floor as she moved backstage, yet every step felt like a drumbeat of destiny. The hum of activity was relentless, stagehands hustling with cables, lights flickering on and off in preparation, contestants pacing like caged birds. Emily hugged her worn notebook tighter, feeling the faint imprint of her lyrics under her fingers, a tangible reminder of every late night she had spent dreaming of this moment. But despite the familiar comfort of her notes, the nerves prickled in her chest like tiny sparks of electricity she could neither ignore nor control. As she rounded a corner, her eyes caught a flash of movement. Mr. Johnson, her mentor, waving from across the hallway. Emily froze, stunned. She had never expected to see him here. Her heart leaped in a way that startled her, threatening to spill the fragile courage she had just begun to summon. "Mr. Johnson," she whispered, stepping closer. Her voice trembled, carrying both surprise and relief. "I wouldn't miss it for the world," he said, his smile warm, steady, and familiar in the sea of chaos. "I didn't have a ticket, but I found a way to sneak in. You need someone in your corner, don't you?" Emily blinked, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Mr. Johnson wasn't just a mentor. He had been her anchor throughout the years, the steady hand guiding her through self-doubt and quiet despair. He had believed in her even when she doubted herself, reminding her that her voice was more than just notes on a page. It was hope, it was comfort, it was a gift meant to be shared. Why are you here?" Emily asked, her voice barely audible over the backstage noise. "Because you've carried this dream for too long to face it alone," he said, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "And because I know the world needs to hear your voice. Remember why you're here, not for them, not for the cameras, not even for the applause. Sing because it's yours to give. Sing because someone out there might need it more than you know." His words settled over her like a warm blanket, wrapping her frazzled nerves in something safe and familiar. Emily's chest rose and fell as she tried to steady her breathing. For the first time in hours, maybe even years, she felt truly seen, not as a contestant, not as a performer, but as a person, someone who mattered. Someone whose voice could matter. A stagehand called out, "Contestant 23, you're on in 5. The words cracked through Emily's reverie like lightning, igniting a fresh surge of panic. 5 minutes. 5 minutes to calm herself, to find her courage, to step onto a stage watched by millions of eyes and cameras and judges who could make or break her in seconds. Emily's knees felt weak, but Mr. Johnson's hand remained on her shoulder, grounding her. "Look at me," he said softly. "Do you feel that? That's fear. But do you know what else it is?" Emily shook her head, swallowing hard. "It's proof that you care, that you want this, that you've worked for it, that you have a chance to shine. Fear doesn't mean you're failing, it means you're alive, and that this moment matters." Her lips quivered as a small smile tugged at the corners. She felt tears threatening to fall but blinked them back, unwilling to let her emotions betray her strength. Mr. Johnson gave her a nod that spoke volumes, a silent affirmation that he believed in her, no matter what happened on that stage. Emily took a deep breath, letting the words sink into her bones. "Okay," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "Okay, I can do this." "Good," he said, stepping back just enough to give her space. "But remember, don't perform for anyone but yourself. Give them your heart. That's all that matters." As he moved away, Emily found herself scanning the backstage area again, noticing the small acts of humanity that had gone unnoticed before. A young contestant helped another untangle a microphone cord. A stagehand paused to reassure a nervous singer that everything would be okay. Even the camera crew shared brief smiles and encouragements. It was a world fueled by support, by kindness, by the quiet understanding that everyone here was trying, everyone here was vulnerable. Then, she noticed something else, a young boy in the audience, allowed to watch from the special backstage seating for family and friends. He held a handmade sign that read, "Your song gives me hope." Emily froze. The words were simple, yet they pierced straight through her fear. She realized, suddenly and profoundly, that this was no longer just about her. Her voice could reach someone, could lift someone, could make someone feel less alone. That tiny sign reminded her why she had spent years singing into an empty room, why she had endured the long shifts at the diner, why she had clutched her notebook so tightly when no one was watching. Her chest swelled with a mixture of nervousness and resolve. Fear was still there, but now it was accompanied by purpose. Emily realized that courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was acting despite it, letting hope guide the first step, letting her heart speak louder than doubt. The countdown continued. 3 minutes, 2 minutes, she adjusted her notebook one last time. Tracing the edge of a lyric that had become her mantra, "Sing like the world is listening, because maybe it is." Her fingers lingered on the page, memorizing every word, every curve of the letters. Emily's mind drifted briefly to the people she loved, the friends who had stayed up late listening to her practice, her parents who had supported her even when they couldn't fully understand her dreams, and even the strangers who had smiled at her songs in the quiet moments of her life. They had all played a role in shaping her courage, giving her strength when she felt none. She realized, with a quiet clarity, that tonight wasn't just about talent, it was about connection, about the invisible threads that tie one human heart to another. A stagehand approached, gesturing toward the entrance. "You're up, Emily." Her legs wobbled slightly, but she lifted her chin. Mr. Johnson's earlier words echoed in her mind, "Sing because it's yours to give." She walked toward the stage, each step echoing in the quiet hallways of her mind. She could feel the energy of the audience seeping through the curtains, a tangible hum of expectation, excitement and judgment. But she didn't feel alone. She felt the support of everyone who had touched her life, every kindness, every smile, every moment that had led her here. And as she reached the edge of the stage, peeking through the curtains at the bright lights and the sea of faces, Emily's nervousness transformed into a quiet determination. She wasn't performing to win, she wasn't performing to impress. She was performing because her voice was meant to be heard, because hope could travel on a single note, because one song could change one life, and maybe, just maybe, more than one. With a final deep breath, she stepped into the light. The lights were blinding. Emily squinted against the harsh glare, as she stepped fully onto the stage, the hum of the audience washing over her like a tidal wave. Every face in the crowd was a blur of expectation, every camera lens a sharp eye watching her every move. The judges' table seemed impossibly close, their expressions a mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and polite encouragement. Simon, the infamous tough judge, sat with his arms crossed, eyes narrowed slightly, as if he could already see through her. Emily's heart thundered in her chest, she could feel it, every beat vibrating through her chest, echoing in her ears like a drumroll she hadn't rehearsed for. Her fingers tightened around the notebook she still held in one hand, even though she knew she wouldn't need it once she began to sing. Her legs felt like lead, her knees threatening to buckle. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide backstage, to escape the judgment, the pressure, the overwhelming weight of the moment, and yet, she couldn't. Not now, not after everything. A stagehand whispered something from the wings, and she realized it was her cue. The music for her opening note began softly, the first piano chord resonating through the floor and into her bones. Emily inhaled, trying to calm the storm inside her. She closed her eyes for a brief second, remembering her mentor's words, "Sing, because it's yours to give. Sing because someone out there might need it." The memory of the young boy with the handmade sign flashed in her mind. "Your song gives me hope." She swallowed and something inside her shifted. This wasn't about Simon or the judges or the applause. This was about giving her voice to the people who might be quietly waiting to hear it. She opened her eyes. The lights no longer blinded her, they framed her. The audience no longer intimidated her. They were her witnesses, her friends in spirit, each of them waiting for a song that could reach them in a place words alone could not. The first note escaped her lips tentatively, soft and unsteady, almost like a whisper in the cavernous auditorium. Her voice trembled, and for a moment, she feared it wouldn't carry, feared it wouldn't matter. Simon's eyebrow arched slightly, and she felt a pang of self-consciousness. But then, she noticed something small yet monumental. A mother in the front row was holding her daughter's hand tightly, tears pooling in both their eyes. Across the auditorium, a man sat leaning forward, his gaze fixed, mouth slightly open as if he couldn't believe the purity of the sound he was hearing. And then she saw him, the young boy from backstage, holding up his handmade sign again. Emily's breath hitched. His eyes shone with admiration and belief, and in that moment, every ounce of fear drained from her body, replaced by something stronger, purpose. She realized, vividly and completely, that she was singing for him, for the people who quietly waited for hope, for comfort, for a reminder that beauty and kindness still existed in the world. The second note was stronger, the third bolder, her voice began to fill the space, weaving around the murmurs and shuffles of the audience like a gentle tide, drawing everyone closer into the emotion she carried. Emily closed her eyes again, letting the music guide her. Each lyric came from a place deeper than practice, deeper than talent. It came from her heart, from years of longing, from nights spent alone with only her voice and her dreams. Yet, just as she started to settle into the song, doubt crept back. What if I fail? What if they don't feel this? What if my voice isn't enough? The fear pressed on her chest, making it hard to breathe. She nearly faltered, a shaky inhale threatening to shatter the melody. She thought she might collapse under the weight of expectation, under the raw vulnerability of exposing her soul to strangers. But then, a whisper of memory saved her. Mr. Johnson's words echoed. Fear doesn't mean you're failing, it means you're alive. Alive. She realized she wasn't failing, she was living, fully, in this single, fleeting moment that held the power to change not just her life, but the lives of those listening. She straightened, lifted her chin, and let her voice soar. The auditorium fell silent in a way that felt sacred. Every rustle, every cough, every impatient shift ceased as her song filled the room. It was no longer just Emily singing, it was hope, love, and courage made audible. She felt it ripple through the audience, felt the way it softened shoulders, wiped away invisible tears, and connected hearts that had never met. Simon leaned forward, his eyes narrowing in a way that suggested skepticism but also fascination. The other judges sat, rapt, holding their breath as if afraid to blink and miss the moment. Emily couldn't see their internal reactions, but she didn't need to. She could feel the energy in the room, the way the song was weaving itself into everyone's hearts, the way it carried meaning far beyond the notes and lyrics she had rehearsed so many times. And then she noticed a young girl in the audience, maybe 10 or 11, gripping the edge of the seat with both hands, eyes wide and shining. Emily remembered herself at that age, quiet, overlooked, singing in a small room where no one else listened. She imagined that girl going home tonight, inspired, believing that her dreams were valid, that her voice mattered. Emily's throat tightened, a lump forming as she realized the true power of her gift. The song continued, flowing effortlessly now. Her confidence grew, but it was not arrogance, it was clarity. She understood in that moment, that this performance was not a competition. It was a gift, it was connection. It was a reminder that one voice, one song, one brave heart could pierce the noise of the world and touch souls in ways that words alone could never achieve. By the final verse, Emily's voice had found its full strength, pure and soaring, echoing against the walls and reverberating through the souls of those present. Tears streamed down the faces of audience members, and she could see the judges exchanging glances, perhaps realizing that they were witnessing something extraordinary, something beyond mere talent. Her final note hung in the air, fragile and perfect, before fading into silence. For a heartbeat, there was nothing but the echo of her own courage and the overwhelming presence of all those who had believed in her, supported her, and quietly waited for this moment. And then came the applause, a wave so powerful that Emily staggered slightly under its weight. But it wasn't just noise, it was acknowledgement, it was gratitude, it was connection, it was the realization that this single moment, born from fear and nurtured by hope, had created a bridge between her heart and the hearts of everyone listening. As the music ended and the lights dimmed slightly, Emily's chest heaved with emotion. She hadn't just sung, she had bared herself, she hadn't just performed, she had touched lives. And in that sacred, fleeting instant she understood something profound. Courage wasn't just the act of stepping onto the stage. Courage was letting herself be seen, letting her truth be heard, and trusting that it could make a difference. She opened her eyes fully, scanning the audience once more. Simon's gaze met hers, and she saw something she hadn't expected, an almost imperceptible nod, a flicker of respect that spoke louder than words ever could. The other judges' faces glowed with admiration, and in the crowd, the young boy waved his sign triumphantly. Emily smiled through tears she hadn't even realized had fallen. For the first time she felt it, the sheer unstoppable power of one song, one voice, one moment, and it had only just begun. The auditorium had fallen into a hushed reverence, as though the very walls were holding their breath, waiting for Emily to continue. She stood center stage, heart pounding, voice still trembling slightly, yet there was now a fierce determination in her eyes. The first half of her song had been tentative, an exploration of her own courage. But now, with the warmth of connection and the subtle encouragement of everyone who had silently supported her journey, Emily's voice soared with unwavering confidence. Her notes, rich and resonant, carried across the room, and for the first time, she felt truly free. The piano accompaniment seemed to anticipate her every emotion, the melody rising and falling as if it were breathing alongside her. Emily's arms lifted slightly unconsciously, as if opening herself fully to the moment. This was no longer a performance, this was a message, a gift, a declaration of hope. She noticed faces in the audience contorting with emotion. A young woman in the second row covered her mouth, tears spilling silently as though afraid to disturb the sacredness of the song. An elderly man's hand trembled slightly as he clutched his chest, moved by a rawness he hadn't felt in decades. Across the hall a teenage boy wiped his eyes with the sleeve of his jacket, lost in the vulnerability and beauty of Emily's voice. The song's bridge approached, and Emily's breathing caught for a fraction of a second. The crescendo loomed, the point where the rawest emotion would be unveiled. Her mind flickered to doubt, what if I crack? What if this isn't enough? But she quickly shut down the fear with the memory of the little boy backstage, holding his song, "Your song gives me hope." The thought of his wide, trusting eyes and the belief he had invested in her made her chest swell with purpose. She wasn't singing for applause, for Simon, or for fame, she was singing for all those hearts out there that needed light in their lives, even if just for a fleeting moment. Emily took a deep breath, letting it fill her lungs and settle into every corner of her being. She could feel the electricity of the stage beneath her feet, but it no longer threatened her, it propelled her. Each word, each note, each pause was infused with authenticity, resonating far beyond technical perfection. She sang from a place that could not be measured, the heart. The judges leaned forward in their seats, caught off guard by the emotion radiating from the stage. Simon's usual critical expression had softened slightly, his gaze locked onto Emily as though he were witnessing something he hadn't expected to see in years of evaluating talent. The other judges had tears brimming in their eyes, and for once, the usual professional masks of evaluation had slipped, revealing raw human reactions to the vulnerability and beauty she was offering. Emily's voice rose in a crescendo, filling the auditorium with a power that transcended talent alone. There was an unmistakable universality in her delivery. People from all walks of life felt it, understood it, and connected to it. Some were crying silently, some were leaning forward in awe, and some were smiling through tears, caught in the profound simplicity of a moment where art and humanity collided. Then came the twist, unexpected yet utterly perfect. As Emily hit the final soaring note, Simon's hand shot forward with lightning speed, pressing the golden buzzer. The sound echoed through the room like thunder, shocking everyone, including Emily herself. The golden glow illuminated the stage, signaling an extraordinary recognition. The audience erupted in a standing ovation, clapping, cheering, and shouting Emily's name. But even amidst the chaos, Emily remained rooted in the purity of the moment. Her voice had become a bridge, a connection between strangers, between the stage and the seats, between fear and courage, between doubt and hope. She had not only sung, she had healed, uplifted, and inspired in ways she couldn't have imagined. People came to life with her every note. She saw the tears on the little girl's face, the hands pressed to hearts, the smiles breaking through years of worry and hardship. In a single performance, Emily had reminded them of something elemental and sacred, that human kindness, hope, and courage could flourish even in unexpected places. Backstage, Mr. Johnson's eyes glistened with pride. He clapped silently, tears streaming down his face, knowing that Emily had tapped into a rare kind of magic, a magic that could not be taught, rehearsed, or manufactured. It came from bravery, from openness, and from the pure desire to give one's gift fully to the world. The applause continued to roar. Emily's chest heaved as she absorbed the magnitude of what had just happened. She realized that she had experienced something far greater than any validation from the judges, any advancement in the competition, or any applause from the crowd. She had discovered the transformative power of her own courage, the impact a single voice could have when it was used to lift others rather than to impress or compete. Simon, still visibly affected, leaned back in his chair, allowing himself a rare, genuine smile. He had seen countless performers in his career, but few had touched the room with such sincerity and depth. He pressed his finger on the golden buzzer again for emphasis, acknowledging that this moment would be remembered, not for technique, not for spectacle, but for heart. Emily's voice softened for the final verse, gentle and intimate now, drawing the audience in as if whispering directly to each listener. She could feel every heart in the room, could sense every emotion, every unspoken story, every hidden hope that had been stirred by her song. She realized that this was why she had waited for so long, why every sacrifice and every lonely night of practice had mattered. She had the power to connect, to inspire, to heal, and that power was stronger than any fear she had ever known. The final note lingered in the air, delicate yet resolute, and then silence fell. It was a silence that carried weight, awe, and profound appreciation. And then the applause surged again, louder this time, more insistent, almost as if the entire auditorium had been holding its breath for the perfect release. Emily felt tears streaming down her cheeks, not from fear, not from anxiety, but from the overwhelming recognition that she had just shared something larger than herself. She looked out at the audience, scanning the faces of people she had never met, but who now shared a connection with her through this song. Her eyes found the young boy once more, waving enthusiastically, and she smiled through her tears. In that instant Emily understood the truth she had always intuited but never fully realized: one song, one voice, one moment could indeed change everything, not just for her, but for everyone who had been touched by her courage. Backstage the crew and fellow contestants erupted into applause and cheers as well. Some were crying, others were hugging, and many simply stood still, overwhelmed by the power of what had unfolded on stage. Emily stepped back, taking it all in, feeling a profound sense of gratitude for every act of kindness, every word of encouragement, every small step that had led her here. The golden buzzer flashed brilliantly, signaling a moment that would live forever in the history of America's Got Talent, yet Emily's mind was elsewhere, not on the fame, not on the recognition, but on the ripple she had created with her voice. She had connected hearts, inspired hope, and reminded people of the simple yet profound truth that courage, kindness, and authenticity could move the world. And in that one song, one voice, one moment, everything had indeed changed forever. The roar of the audience still echoed in Emily's ears as she stepped off the stage, her legs trembling with adrenaline and disbelief. The golden buzzer had been pressed, her song had left the room breathless, and yet, in the quiet moments backstage, Emily felt something even more profound than triumph. She felt connection. Her mentor, Mr. Johnson, rushed toward her, his face flushed with excitement and pride. He enveloped her in a hug, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, Emily let herself truly exhale. All the tension, all the fear, all the doubts she had carried for years seemed to dissolve in that embrace. "You did it, Emily," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You didn't just perform, you moved people, you changed lives. And this is just the beginning." Emily's hands trembled as she clutched her notebook, now crumpled from nerves, tears and excitement. I can't believe it," she stammered. I just sang." Mr. Johnson shook his head, smiling knowingly. "It wasn't just singing, it was courage, it was honesty. You opened your heart to the world, and the world responded. That's what matters." Back in the auditorium, the judges were still processing what they had witnessed. Simon, usually stoic and reserved, leaned back in his chair, an almost imperceptible smile playing at his lips. "I've seen a lot of performances," he said softly, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. "But that was something else. That wasn't about notes or technique, that was about heart, that was about humanity." The other judges nodded, their faces reflecting admiration, wonder, and the quiet awe of recognizing something extraordinary. Meanwhile the audience erupted again in applause, chanting Emily's name. But it wasn't just applause, it was a recognition of shared experience. People from all walks of life had felt something in that song, a quiet reminder of hope, resilience, and the simple power of one person daring to be vulnerable. Mothers held their children close, teenagers whispered to friends about what the performance meant to them, and strangers hugged spontaneously, connected through the emotion Emily had evoked. Backstage, Emily's fellow contestants approached her, some with tears in their eyes, some with wide smiles. They didn't congratulate her for the fame or the golden buzzer. They congratulated her for her courage. One young man who had been quietly struggling with his own self-doubt, said, "I've been terrified this whole time, but seeing you made me believe I can do it too." Another contestant nodded, adding, "You reminded all of us why we do this, not for applause, but for moments like this." Emily felt an overwhelming swell of gratitude. All the lonely nights, all the self-doubt, all the small acts of kindness that had carried her here, the water bottle from a stranger backstage, her mentor's encouragement, even the little boy holding a sign, had created a chain of events that culminated in this moment. She realized that hope was contagious, that courage could ripple outward, touching people in ways no one could predict. Hours later, when Emily finally returned to her dressing room, the reality of the moment began to sink in. Her phone buzzed constantly, messages from friends, family, and even strangers praising her performance. Videos of her song were already circulating online, shared thousands of times with comments like, "I cried listening to her, her voice is hope," and "This girl just reminded me why I love humanity." Emily's cheeks flushed at the messages, tears streaming down her face. She had expected nerves, perhaps some recognition, but not this tidal wave of human connection. As she sat down she opened her notebook once more. Her lyrics, scribbled in pencil and ink, seemed suddenly alive, carrying more weight than ever before. She traced the words softly with her finger. "Sing like the world is listening, because maybe it is." She realized that the words had not only guided her performance, they had been prophetic. Her song had indeed reached the world, had touched people, had inspired hope. Emily's mind wandered to the young boy from backstage. She imagined him watching the video of her performance at home, feeling seen and encouraged. Perhaps he would pick up a microphone, a guitar, or even just hum in the shower, discovering the same joy and courage that had carried her here. She smiled, understanding that her moment on stage was not just about winning a competition, it was about sparking courage and hope in others, creating ripples that could extend far beyond her imagination. The days that followed brought a whirlwind of attention. Emily was interviewed on television, her performance shared across social media, and countless people sent messages describing how her voice had affected them. Some were struggling with loss, others with fear, and many simply felt invisible in the chaos of life. Yet through her song, Emily had given them a moment of clarity, a reminder that one person could make a difference. Despite the accolades, Emily remained grounded. She refused to see this as a personal triumph in the conventional sense. Instead, she thought about the kindness and support that had made it possible, the stranger who handed her water backstage, the friend who believed in her mentor who never wavered, and even the quiet faith of the audience members who had trusted her voice. Every act of human generosity, encouragement, and empathy had converged to create a moment of transformation. One evening, as Emily reflected on the experience, she realized something profound: courage and kindness were inseparable. One could inspire the other, and together they had the power to change lives. She understood that her journey wasn't just about her voice, it was about the voices she could awaken in others. Every song, every note, every act of bravery had the potential to ripple outward, touching hearts and igniting hope in ways that were impossible to measure. Emily decided to use her newfound platform not just to perform, but to give back. She began visiting schools, singing for children who felt overlooked, mentoring young singers who doubted themselves, and encouraging people to pursue their dreams with integrity and compassion. Her music became more than entertainment, it became a conduit for connection, understanding and human kindness. And in quiet moments, when she looked back on that first night on the AGT stage, Emily smiled at the memory of stepping into the light, trembling, afraid, yet determined. She remembered the fear, the trembling hands, the racing heart, and the moment when she chose to sing anyway. That single act of courage, coupled with the small kindnesses that had supported her, had not only transformed her life but had reminded the world of the extraordinary power of one song, one voice, one moment. Emily's story spread beyond television screens and social media feeds. It became a testament to the power of selflessness, courage and human connection. People talked about it in homes, schools and workplaces, not just as entertainment, but as inspiration. And everywhere her story reached, hearts were lifted, dreams rekindled, and hope renewed. As Emily prepared for the next stage of her journey, she carried a simple, unshakable truth in her heart, that the smallest acts of kindness, the quietest moments of courage, and the bravest songs could ripple outward to touch lives in ways she would never fully know. Her voice had reached the world, but even more importantly, it had reminded the world, and herself, of the beauty of humanity. And that was a moment worth more than any golden buzzer, more than any award, more than any applause. That was a moment that changed everything.